Welcome to Two Hypnotherapists Talking with me, Denise Billen-Mejia, in Delaware, USA.
And me, Martin Furber, in Preston, UK.
This weekly podcast is for anyone and everyone who'd like to know more about the fascinating subject of hypnosis and the benefits it offers.
I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and psychotherapist.
I'm a retired medical doctor turned consulting hypnotist.
We are Two Hypnotherapists Talking.
So let's get on with the episode.
Let's get this show on the road, Denise.
All right.
Episode 3.
And nobody to interrupt. Nobody to introduce.
Yeah, nobody to introduce this week. Yeah, but what a bumper episode last week.
Yes, it was. But, so you were going to teach me a new phrase. But you think I know what it's going to be about. So tell me about this.
You know what it's about. It's just a sort of bit of a buzzy phrase over here at the moment. Mm-hmm. I've written about it in one of my newspaper columns, actually. When you write down bits of advice or information for people just to inform them about things. I was writing about something that's called urge surfing.
Okay. Which I assume does not mean the urge to surf. So what which I would never have, but many do. What is this exactly? This actually is not a rhetorical question. I stopped him before he told me about it so that we would be able to talk about it on this show. So
okay, right. Well, okay. It's a technique when we all, based on the fact that most urges will pass when we get the urge for something. Apparently it's quite successful in terms of addiction and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But it can work for any urge. So I'm thinking, well, we do a lot of stuff in hypnosis about urges, don't we? About helping people perhaps not to eat or not to eat a certain type of thing. But this technique, urge surfing, it sounds to me like it's based in mindfulness. But I suspect its origins will be in CBT.
All right. So explain this. What sort of an urge? Like I have an urge to go downstairs and get the cake out of the fridge and eat half of it. What is it? Okay. That kind of an urge you're talking about?
Okay. So if you got that urge to do that now, okay, the chances are that urge would go away in about half an hour, whether you ate the cake or you didn't. Mm-hmm. Most urges sort of go away. They pass. So the idea of this is when you get the urge for something, you acknowledge the urge. Okay, don't try and quash it because it'll just fight back more. Mm-hmm. Okay, you acknowledge it and you try and sort of mentally view it from a distance, as it were, without trying to quash it, and just notice things about that urge, and then hopefully it starts to sort of die down and then it passes. So you surf the wave of the urge, riding the wave.
So you enjoy all the parts of the urge except the actual consuming of the cake in this case.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So how would you use that, or what technique that you use already in hypnosis would you consider that?
Well, it all depends on the type of hypnosis, doesn't it? So for example, I'm thinking depending on what techniques we're using with people, when we're using more perhaps sort of like a direct suggestion to people, in future, whenever you see a tree, you will be reminded of whatever. Mm-hmm. In terms of urge surfing, I'm thinking, well, that's a technique that one would explain to a client outside of trance. It's something you may talk to them about in the pre-talk, in the early part of a session, and then perhaps reinforce that during the trance. Reinforce that technique and the use of that technique to them. What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I'm still trying to get my head around, is this really different? If I had, sort of a trigger and response thing, you give people anchors to go to when they have a particular trigger hits them. So somehow to me, I think if I were to spend that half hour contemplating the cake, I have a feeling I'd be downstairs.
Yeah.
Midway through.
Based on the thing of anything you concentrate on, you'll amplify.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, have I got like an experiment on now? So it's interesting, isn't it, that those buzzwords come up, and there's so much, it's reinvented all the time. People that call, I don't want to call anybody out, especially if they're watching this channel, but that hypnosis keeps being reinvented and called something else, sometimes just to get around legal aspects, or if there are some states where being a hypnotist isn't allowed, or at least is frowned on. So somebody will, this is one of my coaching techniques. Would you like to relax now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So and there's a lot of that, and I'm still seeing, and you know who I'm talking about, but I won't name her. There was a hypnotist who fairly recently I came across her on YouTube. She was talking to somebody else, and she said, "Would you like to be hypnotized?" And she did that. And then it immediately cut to the person closing his eyes, giving the impression that that's what hypnosis is, that it is you taking over for the person. And it is just so infuriating to me that we're still doing that. And
it's still so not about taking over. That's the thing.
And it undermines the real utility of hypnosis.
I'm just tempted to do that at you, Denise.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you can have that be a trigger. You absolutely can. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes before you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like when you see these things on YouTube where people claim to walk into a bar and instantly hypnotize the barman to giving them free drinks all night and that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Doesn't happen.
Yeah. Never mind the fact that you ought to have a little bit of knowledge about the person too, because there are some people who should not be hypnotized. Absolutely. And certainly should only be hypnotized under very controlled circumstances. And you don't know who Joe Blogg is when you walk in. You have no idea
don't know what that person's medical history is. Trigger. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, you don't know what kind of thing you could trigger. So just getting back to urge surfing for a minute.
Sorry.
Yeah, it sounds buzzy, doesn't it?
It does. It's very buzzy.
I like the sound of it, but then it brought me onto thinking about something else, which was something I talk about when dealing with young people and self-harm. Okay. And that's about riding out the urges. When young people get the urge or anybody gets the urge to self-harm, we're talking about deliberate self-harm now. Yeah. Intentional stuff. I'm not talking about long-term abuse of ourselves with the excess use of alcohol.
Okay, so usually the most common advice to somebody who's having thoughts of doing something bad to themselves is find somebody to talk to, pick up the phone and talk to Samaritans, or find your best friend, to go find your mum, whatever. So in what way would this, where would that fall?
Okay, well, in terms of what I teach with mental health first aid, in terms of young people and self-harm, there's a lot of stuff out there that they signpost to these days where young people who self-harm, young people who harm themselves can find other support. For example, there's an app out there called Calm Harm. And that encourages, again, it's getting back to this thing about the wave. It encourages young people to ride the wave. Because people who self-harm, usually it's an escapism from something. It's a coping mechanism for something that they know no other way of coping with. And so, for example, they teach different skills. So if somebody gets the urge to, say, harm themselves by stabbing themselves with a pen, it encourages them to get ice cubes and squeeze on them really, really hard until that urge has passed. So they're doing something, they're feeling, they're getting rid of that adrenaline.
Yeah, because of that kind of self-harm, that isn't, I need to obliterate myself. It's externalizing what you're feeling inside. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And then, as I say, there's an app I came across called Calm Harm. And that was written by a young person who used to harm themselves. And it's written in the kind of language young people understand, and it gets them through that urge. It gets them to, it distracts them. It's distraction, isn't it? It distracts them and gives them other ways of coping until that urge has passed, until it's subsided.
My concern would be it's just putting off the at some point they need to have a therapist. They need to deal with what that issue is. If you're constantly distracting yourself and just putting off seeking help, does that particular app point people to organizations that would help them?
Yeah, and vice versa. This is also for people who have sought medical advice. They're perhaps being dealt with by CAMS over here, the Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services. This is one of the sort of things they will put in a toolbox to help people who self-harm.
Okay.
This is on top of any additional therapy, etc. And absolutely, the thing here, you know, anybody who is self-harming, it's a medical intervention. Absolutely as simple as that. You know, this is just talking about the urges in general and everything all around.
Yeah, and most people don't worry if I want to go eat half a cake. That is not. It's not a good idea. And
that's a whole other discussion, though, isn't it? Between when does self-care become self-harm? Okay, so if I get home from work all stressed out today and I run myself a lovely big bubble bath and pour myself a nice big gin and tonic and lounge about in there for half an hour, swigging gin and tonic, even though I haven't touched a drink for years, is that self-care or self-harm?
I don't know. Are you going to get addicted to alcohol?
I don't know, but if I turn that, most people would say that's self-care, but if I have 5 gin and tonics whilst I'm in that bath,
little different.
Yeah. So, you know, where's the line?
Well, it also would depend. I don't know. You and I haven't talked about alcohol much, probably because, you know, I'm completely teetotal.
Yeah. So am I these days.
But did you consider alcohol a potentially harmful thing for you? You might have gone down the wrong route with it, or were you just a social drinker?
No, I used to drink excessively. Not daily. By any stretch of the imagination, but I was one of these people that if I was on a good night out, it wouldn't be a good night out unless I was totally sloshed. Yeah. But I mean, these days I just don't touch anything. I can't remember.
Well, that's true about all self-care, really. It's what makes you feel good. What I like doing isn't necessarily what you like doing. But yes, I suppose that there's this self-care and self-indulgence, not necessarily.
The self-indulgence can turn into self-harm, can't it?
Yeah.
But getting back to more deliberate acts of self-harm, as in consuming toxic substances, you know, drinking bleach, stabbing yourself with a pen, cutting yourself, was it? You're good at the big words, Denise. Trichotillomania, you know, when you start pulling your eyebrows out, your eyelashes. Go on, say the word, please.
I can't say it. Shush. Trichotillomania.
Thank you. We'll put it in the show notes.
And we're laughing, but that isn't. When people do, it's particularly children, actually.
Yes.
It's a stress.
Yeah, absolutely it is. But I've seen it with young people where they do it to their eyebrows, they do it to their eyelashes. You know, and they'll do it as a deliberate act of self-harm.
Right.
So again, it's about riding those urges, but then we get back to urges. Okay. And this is the thing about where I think hypnosis could come into it, is when people have a better understanding of how the mind's working. Because when we get these urges for anything, okay, again, it's a bit like out of the heat of the moment in our logical mind, we know it's not good for us. So it's about keeping us in that logical side of the mind more. That's the way I see it. What do you think?
Well, yes, except that hypnotist takes you right out of the logical side of your mind. You want to go to
I know, but once we get back into that logical side of the mind afterwards, we've had a reset.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There are so many things that people do. The other thing that, of course, is to remember that physical activity when you're depressed, instead of pulling your hair out, which is quite a common expression, it must be rooted in something. Go for a walk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go for a walk or do jumping jacks if you can't go outside. Yeah, something.
I always say with that when I'm speaking to clients who are experiencing depression or anxiety, the least inclined you feel to go for that walk, the better you will feel for it afterwards. The more good it will do you. Absolutely, because that's when you are really down in the depths, you just do not want to walk. You don't want to go outside. You
don't want to do anything. You pull the cover
over your head.
Yeah.
And you'll do the same thing again the next day because that's what kept you safe the day before.
Exactly. Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, so, that's the one.
All right. So I will investigate urge surfing and how it relates to what I do with clients. But what else is new?
I was just thinking like sort of like combining it with hypnotherapy though. Mental rehearsal techniques. We do that in hypnotherapy a lot, don't we? Again, we're in that lovely relaxed state, that nice state of hypnosis, blissful relaxation. But we can mentally rehearse anything, whether it's our golf swing or that upcoming meeting or something like that.
So could you imagine yourself eating the cake?
No, but you could imagine yourself surfing the urge. I was just going to say urging the surf then.
Okay. So you imagine how much better you'll feel the following day when you haven't eaten the cake.
Yeah. Well, see, okay. There we go. Talking of cake and weight loss and things, that's what I always do with my clients, weight loss clients. It's imagining themselves when they've achieved what they want to achieve.
Well, yes, you look forward 5 years from now when you look like this.
That future mental rehearsal. Yeah, that future mental rehearsal. So this is what just got me thinking with urge surfing. Combining it with hypnosis, the mental rehearsal aspect of it for sure.
Yeah. Is this just a phrase that's becoming very popular in England? Is that where you found it?
Popping up here and there.
I'll have to watch out for it here because it's bound to show up over here too.
It usually starts over there and comes over here.
I haven't seen it.
No.
Write in and tell us if it's been in America and I've been oblivious.
It's popped in a few conversations with fellow professionals. I've seen it here and there. I've heard references to it off other people. And like I say, I explained it in my newspaper column this week. One of my newspaper columns, I actually thought I'd write about it because it's one of those little techniques that you can put into a general mental health and well-being column, as I've explained things in the past about future rehearsal, etc. But no, I just wondered if you heard it because I thought maybe this started in the States.
Well, I bet I'm possibly oblivious. Maybe it's in California and wandering over this way because it's on one side of the country or the other. And it's quite a ways.
Right. Okay. Right, so
what else
are we going to talk about today?
I don't know. What else have you written about recently? Because you write about mental health issues. So what and that obviously spills over into a lot of hypnosis.
Absolutely.
Well, the topics have been.
I write about anything that I may possibly treat people about, or anything that's bothering the population in general. We did a feature recently on World Suicide Prevention Day, which was in September, writing about that and just giving out general information. What are some of the things I've written about recently? Toxic work environments.
Get a lot of feedback from that because I'm in so many doctors groups and so many doctors are unhappy and there was just a report. I can't remember the statistics exactly, but the number of health professionals who are threatened or actually harmed in the workplace because people don't agree with what's happening or just furious about something.
Threatened by patients, you mean?
Patients and patients' relatives,
yeah. I can well believe that. Because of course emotions are high, people are ill. Doctors are working 14-15 hour shifts. Doctors don't have the time to explain things properly sometimes.
I think it's probably a bit beyond that. I mean, we always, when you give people bad news, you're very careful about where you position yourself in relation to their arms and legs. It sounds odd, but I mean, 40 years ago when I was working in pediatrics, if you told somebody their little child was gone and there was nothing else you could do, it was not uncommon for them to flail. They're not actually aiming at you. It's a
lashing out at the world.
Lashing out the world, exactly. So but what we're seeing now is much more deliberate, thoughtful harm. People's cars being attacked and slashed and keyed and just
Do you think this is like a way of the world though, Denise, in general, like a loss of respect for authority in general? Or
I think we've got some, I don't really keep track very well of what's going on in the UK, but here in the States it's a very weird world we're in right now. A lot of anxiety, a lot of upset and not coping with it in appropriate ways.
Yeah. Do you think there's been a big change since COVID?
Yeah, there's definitely been a change. I think it was some of it was coming before, but definitely that has worsened everything.
I'm just thinking of like long-term societal effects from, you know, being locked up and things.
Yeah, we have a real spike in teenage depression and
we've got that over here as well. Yeah, we've absolutely got that over here. The other thing over here is, you talk about doctors and lashing out or one thing or another. The consultants and the junior doctors are all on strike today over here in the UK.
Are they today?
Today's the 19th of September that we're recording this show, anybody. The doctors, the consultants and the doctors are on strike today, which is the first time ever for them both being out at the same time. And the general opinion you seem to see on the news of most people is they're in support of the doctors and the consultants. The furious about the waiting list themselves, but they do, the doctors and consultants do still seem to have the public sympathy on an individual basis. So yeah, I've read different bits and pieces about NHS staff particularly feeling and being more threatened than previously, and being actually attacked rather than just threatened to be attacked far more than it used to be. And again, it got me thinking, is this some kind of residual effect from COVID, or is it a societal thing? You know, it's like shoplifting over here has gone up something like 50% in the last year. Okay.
Really? Are they nicking posh handbags, or are they taking food?
Food.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a different.
Yeah, and it's different. People that perhaps have never gone down the criminal route before, that are just finding themselves in desperate situations. People that have, you know, bought and paid for things all their life are suddenly just succumbing to that temptation when they're out of shoving, I don't know, a packet or a box of whatever in the shopping bag while they feel they're not being looked. Something like the Co-op, you're familiar with the Co-op, aren't you? They're reporting nationwide something like 900 incidents a day in the UK of shoplifting.
Okay, let's dial it back to hypnosis again. How would you help somebody who was feeling so much pressure? If I'm your typical little old lady, I go shopping and I suddenly decide I can't afford that box of biscuits, since I'm talking to the English crowd too, or cookies, as Americans would say, and I slide it into my bag surreptitiously, whether or not I get caught. And I'm overcome with horror that I've done such a thing. My mother must be rolling in her grave. How would you help me deal with that?
Well, the first thing I would say is don't beat yourself up about it. You know, who hasn't made a mistake at some point in their life? You know, how would I say it? Just as one human being to another. If you feel that racked about it, you know, go to the shop and leave some money on the counter and walk out again. Because that's, you know, it's often the way, isn't it? When people have done something that's perhaps not fitting in with their usual moral compass, it's the guilt afterwards that really affects them. So using hypnosis, you can help take that guilt away on something like that, for sure you can. Help settle their mind that, you know, they haven't just gone out and deliberately crashed somebody's car.
While allowing them to reset and giving them some options to go get food. Because you don't want to hypnotize somebody so now they feel just fine going and nicking stuff left.
No, not at all. As I say, we're talking on a scale here.
Self-forgiveness.
Yeah, self-forgiveness. Absolutely, yeah. Self-forgiveness as well. You know, and as I say, if you did pinch a packet of biscuits and you wanted to put it right, just go in the shop, leave the money on the counter and walk out. Don't say a word. You felt that bad about it. But you know, it's like, it is easy, isn't it? This is what happens if we suddenly feel guilty about something. And this happens when we're stressed. If we're really stressed and anxious when something's gone wrong in our life, we will automatically think of something we did that was perhaps bad years ago, or something bad that happened to us. And it will start to go round and round and round in our minds. Whether that's, you know, I don't know, we could have done something, you know, terrible 20 years ago, or we deemed it to be terrible. I don't know. We cheated in an exam at school or something. It'll suddenly start going round in our mind. Right. Or when we feel we might have offended somebody with something we said, it'll suddenly come back to haunt us. And that can happen when we're stressed and we're anxious. And hypnosis can help with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure it can.
I'm trying to imagine somebody writing on my intake form, you know, What do you want to talk about? Nicking a box of biscuits.
Well, you brought the subject up, Denise, about biscuits. Is there something you want to tell me?
No, I don't usually buy them. So we both have appointments fairly soon.
I know.
And what is coming up next week?
What is coming up next week? We have got Beverly Densham on next week.
Okay. Tell us about Beverly a little bit so people know to watch out for it.
Beverly is a Pilates instructor. Okay.
Oh, our first non-hypnotist. Yeah, absolutely.
Second non-hypnotist. The first one was her sister.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that was hypnosis adjacent.
That was hypnosis adjacent, yeah. No, Bev is a Pilates instructor, but is also very, very big on self-improvement, mind work, and helping people to feel their best selves. And she's also a firm believer in hypnotherapy as one of the things that, help people. And I thought it would be good to get her on for a chat about what she does and what we do. And let's find some common ground.
Yeah. And probably that conversation will be a lot more linear than this one has been.
Yeah, well, as usual, we go all over the place, don't we? So we've gone from urge surfing to nicking biscuits. Now, if that old lady had been taught to resist that urge.
Well, this old lady is going to go to her next appointment now. And I will see you next week, sir.
Okay. Catch you on the next one, Denise.
We hope you've enjoyed listening. Please remember, this podcast is designed to give you an insight into therapeutic hypnosis and is for educational purposes only. So remember, consult with your own healthcare professional if you think something you've heard may apply to you or a loved one.
If you found this episode useful, you can apply for free continuing professional development or CME credits using the link provided in the show notes. Feel free to contact either of us through the links in the show notes. Join us again next week.